Hello and welcome back to another Last of Us review, and today we'll be reviewing episode 5 of The Last of Us Season 1. But before we get into this, I want to warn you there will be slight spoilers in this review, so leave if you do not want spoilers. So now that we're out of the way, let's jump right into this. This episode starts with a Henry and Sam little flashback to see how the QZ fell and how they ended up at Joel and Ellie. I'm really happy there's no 2003 flashback, and I don't really mind the small kind of open with those two characters because it really introduces us to them and we get a feel for their dynamic. But the main focus of this episode is about Joel, Ellie, Sam and Henry making a plan and to try and escape the city using the tunnels, and it ends with a big fight between the infected and the living. This episode adapts the rest of the Pittsburgh part of the game from Joel and Ellie meeting Sam and Henry for the first time all the way up until they finally escape Pittsburgh. So that is the bridge section, the sewer section, and then the suburb section. That's a lot of things they went through, and I have to say they did streamline this quite well. There is a few things that I felt like they could have spent more time on, and that is the tunnel section. I definitely think they could have spent more time on that because in the game it is a big thing. Like, our characters get separated and you get very interesting dynamic with Sam and Joel and Henry and Ellie, and those two characters get split up, and in the show they could have done that and you could have seen these two characters dealing with the other person's child in a way, and you could have done some of that. But in the show it is just they walk in, they find an abandoned area, we get an Easter egg to the backstory of the area with the kind of drawing of the two soldiers. That's it. It is just a very wholesome moment, and I definitely think that's weaker because you could have made this more tied into the battle at the end with having the infected at the end be connected to the infected in the tunnel. And maybe this could have been an introduction to the stalkers because we haven't seen the stalkers yet in the show, and it kind of seems like a bit of a weird thing to introduce the bloater first before the stalkers. So maybe we are not going to see the stalkers in the show because this has been the perfect time to introduce the stalkers. I had a very claustrophobic horror part of the episode in the tunnels, and with the infected that purposely sneak up on you and only attack you when you're not facing them. I just felt they got through most of this episode with no issues, and there should have been maybe more struggle in the tunnel is all. But other than that, they adapted everything else very good. I really liked the sniper scene. I was surprised how well they adapted. I was like, okay, they're going to get to the exit. There might be a big fight. Kathleen might catch up. No, they were like, we're going to do the sniper part of the game. And when we were adapting beats from the game, it worked really well. But when they were trying to add new things to the story, the writing wasn't very good, I feel. And the biggest blunder with the writing this episode is with Sam and Henry. Both of those characters were just really badly adapted in my opinion, and I don't like what they did with Sam, because what they did with Sam is they just made him 6 years younger, but I didn't mind that because it changed their relationship with Ellie, because in the game it was just a bit weird with Sam obviously having a crush on Ellie. In the show it's way more wholesome, where we get some very nice moments where Ellie is like kind of a big sister, or she's just a big kid with Sam, and it's very good to see those two characters just kind of messing around. But the big issue is that they made Sam deaf for basically no reason, just to be all-inclusive in a way, because it factors into the story not at all. What they should have done, if they're gonna make Sam deaf, have something that happens solely because Sam is deaf. Like in the tunnels, maybe because Sam's deaf, he doesn't hear the infected, or he doesn't hear that he stepped on some glass, and it leads to a big fight scene. Sam is just there, and all the deafness does is take away from some very dramatic scenes near the end of the episode. So I wasn't a fan of them changing Sam like that, and because you changed Sam like that, you had to change Henry, and they then just changed Henry to make him worse. I don't like that they connected him to Fedra, and because they made Sam deaf, they had to change that he was very close to his brother Henry, and then they made Henry just kind of a wet blanket almost. Like, you had Henry be like, oh, I've never hurt any person. You're like, how did you survive this long? Especially with you having to look after your deaf brother. And it just made Henry seem very dumb. It was just like, okay, you ruined Henry. Henry should be way more ruthless because he's having to look after himself, but having to look after somebody who cannot hear in an apocalypse where noise is very important. Also, I just want to mention the backstory for Henry and Sam because I just felt like it's way too convoluted, with Sam having leukemia, Henry having to sell out Kathleen's brother so that he can get meds for Sam. I just wasn't vibing with that, and I was like, okay, you were just trying to make sure that everything's connected somehow, and it just didn't really work In the game, it was a simple backstory. They were traveling through Pittsburgh and they got stuck. And they were just trying to connect everything for no reason, and it just made the writing feel a bit off this episode. But some big positives is that this episode didn't have any pacing issues like our last episode. Like, I really didn't like the pacing in the last episode. This episode is a little slow at the start, but it's just setting up the plot. And I really like the pacing from start to finish. It works well almost all the time. It's just a bit at the start and a bit at the end which I have issues with. This episode looks amazing. We get new looks at different parts of the cities. So massive win to everything, cinematography, everything with the audio, everything like that. Absolutely perfection, and it shows that this show is worth so much money. There is no stupid shots in the woods like in The Walking Dead. 11 years in the woods doing absolutely nothing where everything looks exactly the same. Every single shot in this show looks unique. This episode still does have the subplot of the Hunter story, and I did like it a little. This episode has them starting with a little riot, and it is about explaining why Kathleen is the leader of the Hunters, and it is somewhat believable. The story is that she loses her brother, and because she loses her brother, she steps into his role, and she's like gone full-blown Karen, and just goes, "You kill my brother, I kill you." However, at the start of this episode, and for most of this episode, she is very much just a Karen to me. You can sympathise with her, and she is humanised by the end of the episode, and you're like, okay, I do not absolutely hate you anymore. I feel your pain, I know what you're going through, I can understand your point of view, but you're still kind of a Karen. Anything she says just sounds very Karen-like, and it's an issue with the casting. Her acting wasn't the best, and she's definitely the weakest link in this entire episode. Even though I don't like Henry and Sam, they are still better than Kathleen. Like, maybe if you just changed the actor, we would have gone from acceptable acting to exceptional, because all I got from Kathleen for most of this episode was just, we have a Karen as a leader. If we had a Karen in the post-apocalypse, this is what Karen would do. The best part of this episode is definitely the big battle at the end, and that is chaotic in the best way. It is just a spray and pray. When those infected just kind of rush out of the ground, you're like, yes, and then you hear and see the bloater, and it's absolutely perfection. It looks like it's ripped straight out of the game. However, it does basically nothing to the story. None of our characters, Joel and Ellie, even see the bloater. They are too busy off doing something else, running away, Joel sniping, and Ellie just kind of hiding. All the bloater does is roars, throws a guy, and then rips apart the voice actor for Tommy, but I admit, in the exact same way that if you die from the bloater would happen in the game. It's the same animation where he puts his fingers in your mouth and then rips your head apart. That was a cool little Easter egg, but that's all the bloater did. And if we see no more bloater this season, they've completely wasted the bloater. The bloater should have been a big thing that our characters had to overcome. But instead the bloater is just an Easter egg, basically, and then kills off one of the voice actors from the game. Now, I do want to talk about the ending, so massive spoilers from here on out. 3, 2, 1, if you're still here, massive spoilers. So this episode ends with the death of Sam and Henry, and it is definitely worse in the show. The game did so much better because it focused more on Sam and Henry, and you had more time in the game to care about them, so when they died, it was more shocking. Like, they did Bill's and Frank's so well, I was going to this episode to think, okay, they're going to do Henry and Sam so well. They didn't. It felt rushed, and I didn't care. They also didn't bother to have Joel and Henry bond at all. In the game, you have this massive bonding moment between the two characters, and then Joel's like, you should come with us. In the show, they just sat there, and Joel's like, hey, why not? Join some Wyoming. It just felt very rushed, so they could focus on Ellie and Sam talking to each other, and then reading their Easter egg book, and that scene between them just didn't work. They're trying to do the scene from the game, word for word, but because they decided to make Sam deaf, the characters had to stop, write it down, and then sit and read out their answers. And I was just like, why? All you've done is just make this scene worse. It sounds like kind of big final moment. And I didn't like that we have Sam show Ellie his bite. Maybe they're going to do more of it because Ellie tried to cure him. They should have definitely kept it a secret and done like the game where Ellie walks in and she gets jumped. And definitely with the death of Henry, that was rushed, with Henry immediately killing Sam, and then instead of blaming Joel like he does in the game for a bit, and then kind of backing himself up, Joel trying to calm down and kill himself, he goes bang and then bang, and you're like, okay, we're over now. No emotional heartbreaking moment for Henry. It's just bang bang, move on. Oh look, Joel's got a new backpack, and guess what? It's the backpack from part 2. I saw that and I was like, wait, Henry's backpack is Joel's part 2 backpack. That's the reason why he just kind of forgets to pick it up in episode 4, so he can get the one from the second game. Moving on to my one sentence, that's one word over review, and this episode is a massive improvement on episode 4 because I really didn't like that. I'd have to say this is a great episode, and the most I could give it is really an 8 out of 10. It does have some big issues with me not liking what they did to Sam and Henry, and not liking how they kind of wasted the bloater. But it does tell the rest of the Pittsburgh part of the story very well, and I really enjoyed the action scene at the end. And this is it for me today, so make sure to tell me down below, did you love this episode, did you hate it, what would you rank it out of 10? And make sure to like and subscribe to keep up to date with all Last of Us reviews and to help out the channel. So goodbye, peace out, and I'll see you in the next video.